Okay, so now we're going to do the trouser draft. The first thing to do is cut yourself a 36-inch by 43-inch piece of pattern paper. Once you've done that, I want you to fold it lengthwise in half. This will help you establish where the center of your paper is. And then go ahead and crease it gently, like so. Once you've done that, open it back up. And now on your crease line, go ahead and we're going to draw a line going right down the center of that. I like to mark kind of each end of the crease, and then take your ruler and line up those two marks. And then go ahead and draw your line. And I want you to do it from one edge of the paper all the way to the other. There we go. Alright, now at the top or the left side of the paper right here, we're going to measure down 3 inches. Right on that line we just drew, the center line. Measure down 3 inches and mark. And we're going to label this point A. Okay, now we're going to start establishing our crotch line, our hip line, knee, and ankle. So now what we're going to do is measure down from point A, 38 inches, okay, and mark that. So, I do not have a ruler that is 38 inches long, but I do have one that's 36. Alright, so there's 34 inches. For that marker, I just need 4 more inches. Right there. And there's 38 inches. So I'm just going to double check that. There's 36 plus 2. Perfect. Okay. And we're going to label this point B. Alright. So this will end up being our waist. This will be up the hem or the ankle of our trouser. So now we're going to measure down our crotch depth, which is 10 inches. Plus we're going to add 3/4 inch ease to that, which will make it 10 3/4. So from point A, we'll measure down 10 3/4. And mark that. Okay. That we're going to label D. So there's our point D. So now we're going to measure up from point D up towards point A, 3.5 inches. That is about 1/3 of this crotch depth. So 3.5, 1, 2, 3.5. And let's mark that. And we'll label this C. Point C. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and fold this paper. I'm going to fold B mark up to D mark and crease. So let's go ahead, and you should be able to see through your paper. So I'm folding B right up to D. C. Okay, right there. I can see through my paper. My 2 marks are lined up right on top of each other. Make a small crease right here. Unfold your paper. Alright, and now we're going to measure 1 inch above this crease line. So if I put a small mark right there where my crease is, I'm going to measure 1 inch above that and mark, like so. And this is our point E. Okay, so now we have A, B, C, D, and E. And what we want to do now is we're going to square out from each of these points in both directions about 13 inches. So take your square ruler and start squaring. Make sure this is very accurate because these lines are all very important. And you can square longer than 13 inches if you want. Okay. And now we'll do it in the other direction as well. Okay, now that we've squared out on all these lines, let's label them. A is our waistline. Okay. C is our hip line. D is crotch. E is knee. And B is ankle. Let's also label up here back on the left side, and then front on the right side. This will be our back pant leg, our trouser leg, and this will be the front pant leg. Okay, so let's now, at point C, we're going to measure out towards the back 9 7/8. So at point C, we're going to measure out towards the back 9 7/8. This is the back hip arc. So the back hip arc is 9 5/8 plus a quarter equals 9 7/8. Okay. So measure out from C 9 7/8. And let's mark that. And we're going to label that F. And now we're going to measure out the same at D and at A. So 9 7/8 from D. And this is G. And then A, mark that. Okay, and that's H. And now let's connect H, F, and G with a line. There we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to fold point H to point G. And do that. So there's H. You can see right through your paper. You can line them right up. H. And then make a crease like so. Unfold it. There's my crease. So right where my crease is, I'm going to mark and I'm going to label it X. So I'm going to mark that. And that I'm going to label X. Alright, now we're going to fold G to point D. Because we want to find what the measurement is halfway between the two. So let's go ahead and fold those two together. Again, you should be able to see through your paper. And fold the two. G and D are right on top. Crease it. There we go. Now, I'm just going to put a small mark here so I can see my crease better. Right there's my crease. Alright, so we'll measure that. and I'm getting 4 15/16. So from G, we're going to measure out in this direction now, 4 15/16. Let's mark that. Okay. Alright, and we'll label this point I. Alright, now we're going to move to the front of the pant. Okay, so here's my front, I just did the back. Alright, this time we're going to do the same thing in the front of the pant. Measure out like we did in the back. And this time we're going to measure out, again, from point C, 9 3/8. Okay, so it's the front hip arc, whereas here we measure out the back hip arc. Now we're measuring out the front hip arc, which is 9 1/8, plus a 1/4 inch ease, which equals 9 3/8. So let's go ahead and measure out 9 3/8 from C and mark it. Okay, and we're going to label that J. All right. And at A, we're going to measure out 9 3/8 as well. Mark that. And that is going to be L. And at D, 9 3/8. And that will be point K. Alright, let's connect L and K and J, all of one line. There we are. Alright, now we're going to fold L down to K and crease the paper. Find the halfway point. So there's my L, I folded on K. Crease. Let's go ahead and put a mark there where that crease is. Like so. And we'll label this point X as well in the front. Alright, now we need to figure out what a 1/4 measurement is from K to D. To do this, we're going to fold K to D. Like so. There's K and D, I can see through it. And now take this crease we just made and fold that to where K and D are as well. So fold it right on that line. There we are. Crease that. Open up. And now you've quartered it. You can see you have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. Let's just make a mark here from K to this first crease. Or actually, let's do it. Let's make a mark from D to the first crease. And let's take that measurement. So that's 2 3/8. Now on K, we're going to measure out 2 3/8. Mark it. Okay. And we're going to label that point M. We're going to measure out from point H towards side seam along the waist 3/4 of an inch and mark. Okay. We will label that N. So there's N. So now we're going to measure our we're going to take our back waist arc measurement and measure that from point N towards A. So our back waist arc measurement is 6 5/8. But we're also going to add in 2 1/4 inches for the dart intakes. So 6 5/8 plus 2 1/4 equals 8 7/8. Alright, so we're going to measure from N 8 7/8. And let's mark that. And we're going to label that O. So that is O. Now I'll measure out 3 inches from N towards point O and make a mark. Okay, so 3 inches in, and we're going to label this point P. So there's P. And then we're going to measure over 1 inch from point P and make a mark. There we go. And now this is our first dart opening. And from this mark we just made, we're going to measure over 1.25 inches and make another mark. So here's 1.25 inches. We'll make another mark. And then from this mark, we'll measure over another inch and make another mark. There's our second dart opening. So these are the 2 dart intakes for our back pant panel. Okay, so let's find the center of each dart. It'll be 1/2 inch in. So here's one, and then we're going to square our line down about 5 inches. And let's do the same thing here. Square line down about 5 inches. Alright, now we're going to measure down from our waistline. This line here is our fold line of our dart. And we're going to measure down that line 4.5 inches. So measure down from the waistline on your dart fold line. So from waistline on your dart fold line, 4.5 inches, mark, and do the same thing on this one. Now we can connect from the tip of our dart to the dart opening. We can create our dart legs. So let's go ahead and connect those points. And make sure that these lines intersect through the waist. Okay, on the front, we're going to measure from L towards our side seam here. So we're going to measure our front waist arc here from L towards side seam. Okay, so our front waist arc is 7 inches, and we're going to add 1.25 inches for dart intake. So 7 inches plus 1.25 inches equals 8.25. So let's measure from L out 8.25 inches and mark. Okay, this we're going to label Q. That's our point Q. Now from L we're going to measure over 3 inches and mark. Okay, and we're going to label that R. Now we're going to measure over from that mark R 1/2 inch and draw another line. Okay, there's the first dart opening for our first dart in our front pant panel. Okay, now we're going to measure over 1.25 inches and we're going to establish our other dart opening. So there's 1.25 inches, and then from that mark another 1/2 inch. Now we have our 2 front dart openings. Okay, so let's find the center of each of these dart openings. Since these are both 1/2 inch, we're going to measure in 1/4. That'll be the center. And then square a line down at least 4 inches on each one. There we go. There's the fold lines for each dart. And now from the waist, we're going to measure down on each of these fold lines 3 inches and mark. So there's 3 inches. Let's mark that. And this one as well. There's our dart tips. Now we can connect it to our marks at the waistline, creating our dart legs. And now we have our darts. Alright, now we have our dart legs. So we've now established our front darts and our back dart. Now we want to make it so O and Q, these 2 red marks, are equal distance from the side seam. So what we're going to do there is we're going to measure the distance between O and Q. And then we're going to divide that in half. So take that measurement and divide it in half. So it should be 11/16. Okay? Now, square those marks. Here. And here. And relabel. This will be my new Q, and this is my new O. So these red marks are no longer necessary. Okay? So this made it even, so we have a nice even space in between our front and our back. Let's establish our hip curve now. We're going to measure up from our hip 2 inches. And mark. There we go. And let's take our curve ruler. And if we place, again, 11 at that notch, that's 2 inches up from hip, place 11 there. And then bring in the curved ruler, bring in that ruler until it touches your O mark. Okay, so your large end of the ruler's facing up. And right there. And there we go. And then flip it and do the same thing. Put 11 at that notch, or that 2-inch mark, and then bring in your ruler until it touches point Q. And mark it. And now we have the hip curve on the pant. Okay, at point N, we're going to make sure that we have that line squared up for at least a 1/2 inch. And now from the waistline, measure up on point N 1/4 and mark right there. And we're going to label that. That's point S. So this intersection is point S. Now down here, we're going to create a guideline. So here at this intersection where G is, we're going to create a box. So I already have 2 sides of this box, so I'm just going to make a 1-inch box here. So squaring off of here, 1 inch and 1 inch. Okay, so I now have 4 sides to my box. I'm now going to draw a line, going through a diagonal line, starting at G and going through the opposite corner. Okay, this is a guideline to help me find the crotch, the curve of the crotch. Okay, so now we're going to measure out on this guideline 2 inches and label that T. So I'm going to measure right from there, 2 inches, mark it, and that's point T. And now we're going to blend S through X to T and into I. So there's S, okay, and then I'm going to go through X. And I'm just going to draw a line here. Okay, I'm going to use my red pencil or pen because I'm not sure exactly how this curve is going to look yet. So I want to draw it in red first before I true it. Okay, right there I'm hitting X, so this is where my curve is pretty much starting, is at X. Coming, hitting T, and blending in here to line I. So let me draw that in red. Okay, I like how that looks. And notice the curve isn't curving right into point I. It's curving in about, 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and blending and going straight before point I. Alright, I like how that looks, so I'm going to draw that in black because I want to make it permanent. And you can see it blends right into I. And then just checking here, make sure that looks good. Okay, there is my center back crotch curve. And I'm going to write on here center back. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing in the front. So at this intersection, K, we're going to make another 1-inch box. We'll just square a line here. And right here. And then we're going to make a diagonal line coming from point K, going out the other direction, like so. And now we're going to measure from point K up 1.5 inches. So, right there. Almost right on the corner of that box. And I'm going to label this U. Okay, so now I'm going to draw my curve. And it's going to come from X, go through U, and into M. So this is a less of a curve here, or less distance to travel. Again, going X to U and M. So I think right about there looks good. I'm going to draw it in red first to make sure I like it. I think that looks good. So now I'm going to do it in black and make it permanent. Again, that's coming from L. So, all right, then we can label this center front. Okay, there's my front crotch now. Okay, one more thing we want to do is we want to measure down our waist, center front, 1/4 of an inch, and mark. And now let's fold out our darts. Okay, remember how our darts fold? If they're in the back, they fold towards center back. If they're in the front, they fold towards center front. Okay, and I'm talking about the seam allowance folds. So to make them easier to fold, I'm going to score the dart leg closest to center back on each of these darts, and the fold line. And I can even score at where the dart point is. And on the front, I'll score the dart legs closest to center front. Oops. And the center fold line of the dart. And these dart tips. There we go. Alright, so let's go ahead and fold out these darts. And fold right on the tip. Fold out the back darts first. And I'm going to crease the line, the dart leg closest to center back. And then close that dart. And I'm just going to take a piece of tape and tape it closed to make it easier to deal with. And I'm going to do the same back here. And fold out that part. Okay? And then let's do the front as well. Fold it right at the tip of our dart. Dart tips. And then fold the dart leg, or crease the dart leg closest to center front. And close that. And close that second dart. And tape that shut. Okay, now we're going to establish our new waistline. Remember, we have this mark here, 1/4 inch down at center front. We're going to connect this point right here to the side seam, intersection of side seam and waist. Okay. Using your curve ruler, let's find a nice gentle curve. One thing we actually want to do before is on this line here is square out a 1/2 inch and mark. Okay, that's where we want to blend to. We don't want to end up with a curve right at center front because then we'll end up with a point. So we're going to blend right to that mark, a 1/2 inch mark. So let's take a ruler. Looks pretty good right there. I have a nice gentle curve. I'll draw this in black. Oops, let's try that again. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to draw this in black. Go. And right here. Okay, so that's my waistline there. See, it just travels right through. Okay. And then in the back, we'll do the same thing. In the back, we're going up to this S mark. Okay. So remember, so in front, we came in, we lowered a quarter. In back, we raised it a quarter. Let's make sure we have a 1/2 inch here. Let's go out a 1/2 inch there and mark, because that's where we want to blend to. So this intersection at side seam, we're going to blend right into there. Alright. That looks good, pretty good there. So let's go ahead, get a nice gentle curve, and there we go. So now let's not open our darts yet, because we need our dart intake. So right on that new waistline, we're going to use our tracing wheel and trace over right on the waistline where we can see our dart seam allowance. You should be able to see the shadow of it through there. And do the same thing in the front. Okay, let's open up our darts. Now the front darts aren't very big, so there might not be very much shape to the dart intake. And the back will probably have a little more shape than that. Okay, there we go. Alright, I can see my back does have a little more shape. So let's true that in. Make sure everything, I gotta raise up my center fold line there a little bit. Same thing with this one. Make sure it's intersecting. Okay. Draw that in. And here as well. Good. And in the front. Really is very small, very minute. This is basically flat across. Okay. So there. We now have our dart, we now have our pant waistline. Make sure all your lines are intersecting with the new waistline, so if the dart leg is not high enough, extend it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to fold I to point D. Let's go ahead and fold that. You should be able to see through your paper. Here's my point I. I'm going to bring it right over point D and crease. There's my crease. And now I'm going to measure from that crease 1/4 inch and mark. So here's my crease. I'll measure 1/4 inch and I'll mark right there. And we'll label this V. Okay. Now we're going to square V up and down. So, square off that crotch line, and square that line down. I'm going to go all the way down to the ankle, so I can just extend this. To the ankle, and then all the way up through our waist. And we're going to label this crease line. And let's do the same thing in the front. Okay, here in the front we're going to fold point M to point D. Make sure point M is right over point D, they're lined up. Crease it. Unfold it. This is my new crease line here. And we're going to measure 1/4 inch towards M now. from that mark. So there's the mark, 1/4 inch in, mark it. And now let's square up and down that one as well. Square off your crotch line and go ahead and draw that in. And again, we want this all the way from the top to the bottom. So now I can just and intersect with your waist. And this will go right through the center of your dart, your first dart closest to the front if you did it correctly. And label that crease line as well. Okay, so let's create the leg of the pant. So we're going to go down to the hem, all right, and this is the back right now. So we're going to write back here. Here's front. So on my crease line, on the ankle line, or from my crease line on the ankle line, I'm going to measure out 1.5 inches on each side, or 4.5 inches on each side. So there's 4.5 right there, and do it on the other side, 4.5. Right there. And then on the front crease line, I'm going to measure out 4 inches on each side of the crease line. So 4 inches, mark on there, and then 4 inches here as well. There we go. And then we're going to come back up here to the crotch. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark in from I on my back crotch 1/2 inch and mark that. And on my front crotch, M, I'm going to mark in 1/2 inch from there and mark that. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to connect the mark at the ankle line to the mark at the crotch that we just made as 1/2 inch in. This is going to be a guideline, which will eventually turn into a real inseam. So right there. Okay. Now I'm going to take my curved ruler and I'm going to bring it to point I, and I'm going to blend right down into my knee. So I'm going to actually put my curved ruler, notice the large side is up, I'm going to put that against my knee and I'm going to keep pushing this up until it blends right in with that, my original eye line. Looks right there. Looks good. Now I can draw this in permanently. And I'll extend that down to my ankle. There we go. Now let's do the same thing on the inseam of the front. Okay, so here's the mark at the ankle line. And we're going to connect it to the red mark that's 1/2 inch in from M. And we're going to do our guideline first. And then with your curve ruler, putting the flatter end of the curve ruler at my knee and the large curve side up. I'm going to move that up until it touches my point M, which is 1/2 inch out from my guideline. Right there, looks good. And I'm going to draw that in permanently. And I'll extend it down the rest of the way. There we go. Alright, let's do our out seam, our side seam. Okay, so we're going to create our side seam now. This is going to blend in in between kind of D and C right here. So we'll start at the mark at our ankle and bring it right up here. I'm going to draw this in red first to make sure I like it. Okay. Along there I'm going to do the same thing on the back pant leg. So I'm bringing this right up to C line. Again, I'm going to draw in red first to see what I think. And I think that looks pretty good, so now I can draw it in black. Sometimes there needs to be some shaping in here, but this worked out pretty good. Okay. Alright, so let's label this. So we know what it is. This is our pant draft. I'll just label it on the side. This is our back and front trouser sloper. It's a size 10. Put your name and the date. And there it is. Okay, that's the back, or that's your trouser sloper. This is my back panel. And there's the front panel.